What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Let a few more of you get on here before we get too far into this. Today we're going to be chatting about ice, though, and how to make clear ice at home. Super easy to do. Definitely a lot less tricky than it seems. You just have to know a couple of details. So first off, we'll get into this now. Why do we care? What are we used to? What are we typically seeing everywhere, etc.? So a lot of you have seen these. So these are big ice molds in a lot of home bars right now. These are great, except the problem is this is the ice that comes out. So as you can see, we got a nice large cube that's very cloudy on the inside. So why is this happening and why does it matter to us? So what's happening is this tray is very thin. It's going to be like a neoprene or something like that, right? So it's going to create a mold, but it's very thin around all sides. So when we fill this up and put it in the freezer, it's going to get so cold that it's actually going to allow freezing from all directions. So every side of the cube is actually freezing at the same time. Water has amounts of oxygen in it. So as the freezing happens, the gas in the water is going to try to move as the freezing starts. In a tray like this, when it's freezing from all directions, that means that we're going to trap the gas right in the center of the cube. So nothing like horribly wrong with this. Like using this at your house is fine. But the reason we care is that this means the cube is less dense. Since there's air trapped in there, it's not pure solid water, pure frozen water that we're cooling our drink with. So instead, what we do, and a lot of the higher end bars, you've probably noticed this, is in their drinks, they're gonna have ice like this. So crystal clear, you can see right through it. If I throw this in front of my face, you can still see me, right? This is pure frozen water without any gas trapped in it. The reason that that's important for cocktails is this is going to actually melt at a slower rate versus a cloudy cube. So melting at a slower rate means that this clear ice is still keeping your drink cold, but it's not overly diluting it, which is really important to a cocktail that, a bartender works really hard on creating, because any addition of water means that you're changing the flavor of the cocktail, which cocktails are designed to taste that way with certain ratios. So as soon as the ice starts to melt, you're messing with that ratio. So that's why it's important. And that goes even past cocktails as well. For those of you that like any sort of spirit just on a rock, you like the spirit cold. That doesn't mean that you necessarily like it overly diluted. And if you put a cloudy cube in there, this cube's going to break down way faster, and it's actually going to start to add more and more water to the spirit, which means that your spirit is going to get more and more diluted, and it's going to change flavor by the end of your sipping. So that's why we only play with clear cubes in cocktails, as well as any serving of a drink. We don't want to mess with the integrity of the drink or the integrity of the spirit by overly diluting it. These cloudy cubes, though, we do have these at the distillery. We use these as shaking ice in our mixing tins because when you're preparing a cocktail, you want a certain amount of dilution, and especially with egg white drinks. If you're shaking an egg white drink at home, these big cubes beat the crap out of the egg white, and so it froths up really well. So now we'll talk about how to make clear ice. So when I explain the mold is allowing freezing from all directions, right? So we're trapping gas in the center. So what we need to do to actually create clear ice is to allow the gas to escape. So we need to do what's called directional freezing. We do that by insulating all but one side of the liquid water that's being frozen. So there's actually ice companies now that are just preparing cocktail ice. We took a little more hands-on approach. The big companies, they actually have a tank that is designed to freeze from the bottom up. So as you freeze, you're actually forcing the gas just out of the water into the air. Really cool, very expensive. Also takes up a lot of room. For those of you that have been in the block, we don't have much room. So instead, what I'm going to show you and what you can do at home is take your lunch box. So any cheap Igloo cooler, pretty standard, doesn't matter the size. You're going to take one of these and you're going to pop the top off of it. And what you created is an insulated box on everything but the top. So you're going to fill this to a decent amount, like maybe an inch below the top. You want about double the amount of water of the thickness of cube that you want to create. So, if you want a 2-inch cube, you need at least 4 inches of water in there. But you're going to fill this up. Another trick is to use warm water instead of cold water. Warm water is going to cause the freezing to happen a little bit slower, which is also going to allow more gas to escape. So take your lunchbox, make sure it's insulated. Can't be just a cheap lunch or an uninsulated lunchbox. That's not going to work. So insulated lunchbox, pop the top off, fill it up, and then you're going to leave it. This is going to be kind of the tricky part. For this cooler, this is a 9 quarts, 8-liter cooler. It takes our freezer about 44 hours, 46 hours. It's going to be, and at that rate, you're going to have a nice solid 2-inch thick block at least. So put that in, but that's gonna really depend on the cooler size that you're using. So if you use a smaller than 9-liter cooler, it might freeze a little bit faster. So what you don't want is, you don't want it to freeze all the way through. That's gonna be the important part. So there's gonna be a little bit of trial and error based on your freezer and your size of cooler, how well it's insulated, etc. We use the cheap brand Igloo, so these are like $9 at Walmart or something. Throw it in there, wait 44 hours, and pull it out. So when you pull the cooler out, this is going to be kind of hard to see, but let's see. Yeah, you can see it a little bit. If I shake this around, you can see the water below the ice. So that's really important, and we didn't freeze it all the way through. And you're basically going to take that cooler and you're just going to place a cutting board in your sink and flip the cooler upside down. And as the ice starts to thaw a little bit, it's going to pop down onto the cutting board, and the rest of the water is going to run out and go down the drain. So make sure you don't just leave it on your cabinet. There is going to be some water left. So what we're going to have coming out of that is a nice block of clear ice. So if you see in here, you can look all the way through this, and this is the size of that cooler. And what you can see here is you see these jagged edges. So this actually came out of the cooler this way. So those jagged edges are where the ice stopped freezing. So we were freezing this way, water underneath. All of the gas that was in the water escaped into the water that didn't get frozen. So when we dumped it out, all the gas was in there, and we end up with a nice solid block. Next, you need a cutting board, right? Some gloves. Gets cold, and you don't want to touch your ice that you then put in a nice pretty drink, and a bread knife. So the serrated edge of the bread knife works really well to cut your ice. So you're actually going to, you can like trim these to start if you want, but completely up to you. You'll develop your own system. But you're actually going to just start sawing into the ice. And you want to score a whole line on the top of the ice. And once you get down a little ways, you can actually take the back of your hand and just pop it. You can also grab like a wooden mallet or something as well if your hand gets sore, and you're just going to start to cut off pieces of the ice. So then you're going to carefully start to trim it up, and it's just going to get further and further into your shaping. So, I mean, you can go really wild. I've seen people hand carve, diamond shaped ice. It's pretty cool. But you're just going to get closer and closer, and you can just start trimming the edge as well. It works really well. Just start taking it down to the shape that you want. You're going to end up with little ridges doing it with the knife, but that's going to clean up when it's in the drink. It's going to clean up really nicely. So you can do some really cool, like if you're doing a Collins drink, you can do a really thin rectangle that goes all the way to the top. It's really fun. But then you just throw these back on a cutting board or a plastic surface of some sort and put them in your freezer. The one key is that these are going to start to melt a little bit. So if you stack them all and put them in your freezer, they're going to get stuck together. Not a huge deal. Just remember that you might have to pop them back apart with a knife after they've re-frozen together. Another key to this that I didn't mention is after your ice block falls onto your cutting board, you want to make sure that when you look at the block, it has cleared up completely. So the outer edges of it have started to thaw a little bit, and it has a little bit of water on the surface. That is going to, I'm spacing the name for that, but as it clears up, it's going to allow just you to break it into cubes much easier. If you try to saw it and break it up right away, like right after it falls onto your cutting board, it can fracture a lot easier, and you'll end up losing more ice than you end up making. So again, you just kind of take your block, start to cut across it, get a nice line in there, and give it a little pop. Nice clear rectangle, and then take it from there to break it down. So that's really that's the trick. It's not about boiling the water. It's not about using distilled water. I mean, you should use nice water. We're complete advocates for that. Don't just freeze tap water, preferably. The reason for that is that tap water is going to have a little bit of chlorine in it, and that's even trace amounts of chlorine are going to affect the taste of your drink a little bit. So filtered water is really nice for the ice. It works really well, but it's not about necessarily the filtering isn't what's making it clear. It's all about directional freezing. You just have to get rid of the gas that's in the water, and that's in all water. It doesn't matter what type. So that's the trick, guys. Freeze it, directional freezing, freeze it for a certain amount of time, and then dice it up into cubes. We actually originally started this way with cutting it with a serrated bread knife. It took a long time. Our bartenders hated us. Whoever was bartending that day, that was part of your prep work, was to break down all the ice. Now we have a nice stainless steel butcher's bandsaw that me and Cameron rip everything down to, that speeds up the process. But for your home, break it down with a bread knife, show off to your friends, make some clear cubes. It's all about the integrity of the cocktail, and the benefit is you end up with, a very beautiful, aesthetically pleasing cocktail at the same time. So unless you guys have any questions, this block o'clock will be a little bit shorter today, but send us some photos of your cocktails with your clear ice. We would love to see it. Send us a recipe. We'll throw it up on our page. Always love to see what you guys are making. As far as the rest of the videos this week, so on Wednesday, it's going to be really fun. We have Whiskey Jake Norris coming on, which is really awesome. And then on Friday, this will likely be every Friday, we're going to start doing a cocktail tutorial for you guys. So basically like a dinner recipe pretty much. So you guys can follow along. We're going to show you the proportions of the botanicals and fruits for the syrups and the juices and all of that, so that you guys can make the same cocktail at home with us. We'll start featuring our bartenders in that as well. So we'll film them making everything and post that, of course, on Instagram for you guys to follow along and send us photos there as well. So again, hope everyone is healthy and safe and enjoying their time at home, making best use of it. We'll be here cranking booze out, waiting for you guys to come join us again. It's definitely a little weird to see the bar empty every day, but we miss you guys. Cheers. Thanks for signing on and watching.